Please, gentlemen, take your seats. Eric, you got the first. Yeah, that's it. Nope, you're in the right spot. There you go. Luke, you're next. Justin, you're next. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being here for another wonderful program. I'm Ed McElhenney. I'll be doing moderator. I'll be the rudder that kind of steers the ship here a little bit. And I can warn you already, we're going to run out of time. We've got too much to talk about, and just not enough time to do it. Quick introductions. Eric Zipkin is the first guy here. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just going to call you the mission commander. I think that's the best way to put it. He is obviously a C-47 pilot. Alongside him, if you recognize a similarity there, that's his son Luke, okay? Another C-47 pilot. He was the co-pilot on the last mission over to Normandy. And then the last guy back there, pilot in command, Justin Zagota. And he was pilot in command on that flight over. What we're going to talk about today commemorates the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the largest invasion in modern history that cost a lot of lives, but also saved a lot of lives. As you saw at the beginning of that video up there, General Eisenhower said there were 4 things that helped us win the war out there. You know, he mentioned, the atomic bomb, that's pretty obvious. Hey, the bazooka, okay. Hey, the Jeep. And the 4th one was that airplane right there, the C-47. They launched a lot of them. They had a lot of weather problems. They launched at night. They dropped a lot of soldiers. They towed gliders. It has been the workhorse forever. And what we're going to do today is basically, Eric and I are going to go walk over there and describe a little bit about these guys jumping out of the airplanes, how they did it. We'll show you, actual static line there. Zippy, he's got a mic over there too. If you were here before, he is one of the reenactors. He's all suited up with his parachute. And I will make mention that, back in, I think it was about 1979, I was a youngster, but I actually was able to go through Fort Benning and the jump school. So indeed, I proudly wear those parachutist wings myself. I got my 5 jumps because I thought, maybe sometime during my fighter pilot career, I might have to jump out of an airplane. I never did, that's the good news, but at least I went through 5 jumps, and I'll be honest, that was enough. I didn't need to jump out of any more after that. So Eric, join me, please. And this is the guy, this team, by the way, took this airplane over to Normandy this last year. They were there to commemorate the 80th anniversary, and they actually had jumpers jumping out. And we'll get into some of those conversations. But I got to say, besides being the mission commander and being a pilot of this thing, I'm also going to say thanks for being a patriot, okay?
Thank you.
You're obviously honoring that event and those men and women that participated. So thanks for keeping that alive for us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Before we go any further, let's just talk real quick. Hey, the name of this airplane is Placid Lassie, okay? Where'd that come from?
So the Placid Lassie is the original wartime name of the aircraft. When we first started flying her and we brought her to Normandy in 2014, we were approached by a very passionate historian. He says, I know your airplane, and it did not have the nose art. And he identified that by the serial number that this aircraft was indeed Placid Lassie. And he went further and he opened up the unit history, and this aircraft was on the cover of the pictures of this aircraft were on the cover of the unit history. So that's the name Placid Lassie. We subsequently were introduced to the crew. A gentleman by the name of Ed Tunison was the radio operator. He was still alive in 2014 when we flew. He actually flew with us in Europe. Once we made contact, he came over and flew with us, and he explained Placid Lassie. She was the calmest and smoothest aircraft when they would warm up every morning, and that's why they called her Placid and Lassie, because guys talk about airplanes like they're girls, and that is the story.
Okay. How about I noticed that over on the left engine cowling here. Oops, excuse me. There's a name, you guys can't see it out there, but it says Eager Eileen. Where'd that come from?
So we have Idling Ada and Eager Eileen are the two engines, and they were named after the respective wives of the crew chief and the radio operator. And one of the most wonderful memories I have of working with Ed Tunison is his then 70-something-year-old son accompanied him, and he started talking about Eager Eileen. She was really eager, and his son, who's 70, was squirming right next to him. He says, "Dad, you're talking about Mom that way."
Yep, calm down. Okay, let's go back towards the back here. Mm-hmm. How much time you got in these things, by the way?
I don't know, not enough. Several hundred hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to proceed back to the jump door back here, and I think our cameraman's going to be able to follow us. And do your best. Just kind of, you'll be able to see it on the big screen, I think, up there. And just make sure I don't walk into the wing here. And yeah, give us a quick description of, hey, the door, the static line, and hey, we'll talk to Zippy and these folks here in a minute.
Yeah, sure. So this, I guess in C47 parlance, this is the business end. We have the jump door, which is basically just a plug that comes out of the standard cargo door, which is set up to be the right size and shape for parachutists to jump out. And then you have an anchor line which runs through the center of the aircraft, which is where the static lines would be attached to, and people would jump out. I do not have 5 jumps out, and I don't intend to.
I understand.
The other business end, which is oftentimes forgotten, is in the tail, which we can't really see right there, but it's the glider tow hook. Placid Lassie actually is a D-Day veteran aircraft, as I mentioned, and she towed a glider for the first wave of operations.
Describe that briefly. I mean, how many gliders could they tow? How did they get them off the ground? Was it a matter they took off with them, or did they hook up and grab them? How'd that work?
They could tow up to 2, but given the loads during D-Day, most of the time they would just tow 1 aircraft, and a lot of the accounts that we've read is they would basically make the entire crossing at takeoff power because of the weight. So you would take off like we do with sport gliders now, with a glider on tow, and go and fly across the channel. The gliders are kind of the unsung heroes in many ways of D-Day and all airborne operations.
And what kind of speeds were they flying not only when they towed gliders, but when you dropped?
So when ideally the drop, when we do parachute drops for reenactors, we're dropping around 100 to 105 knots.
Okay.
Again, first-hand accounts said that they didn't slow down very much when they were dropping in combat because they wanted to get in and out as quickly as possible. Same idea. We jumped today at 1,000 to 1,500 feet AGL. Again, first-hand accounts, they were jumping at 600 feet or lower.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to go over here to Zippy for a second. And if you haven't been here for the reenactors, Zippy's dressed up like the guy who's really going out of the airplane here. So Zippy, describe, some of the stuff that you're wearing right now.
So the equipment that I'm wearing the M1 helmet with the paratrooper liner. It does have this extra chin strap that is secured. Something that was mentioned before, too, is the Griswold bag, which wasn't dropped when they dropped in Holland, but the Griswold bag, since they hadn't really slowed down and they exited the door at much faster speeds than they should have. Equipment did get ripped off of them, and including that Griswold bag. And it's probably, if you've seen Band of Brothers, you've seen that when Lieutenant Winters comes down and he has a strap and he has no rifle. If I may, with the video, with all of those misdrops, that actually worked to the advantage to the Americans because it confused the Germans. But unlike other armies, and the German army, many times the British army, all of the American paratroopers knew their roles, knew their missions down to the detail. So even those misdrops, they were able to form small units and have small unit actions and get their mission accomplished. As far as the gear, I do have rigger pouches. The rigger pouches are a little bit different than the standard pouches. They can hold more magazines. Thank you, Ernie. The rigger pouches would hold more magazines. I actually, in particular, I usually have my M1 carbine, but I do have, M1 Grand, but I do have my M1 carbine. So the pouches were a little bit different than that. I believe we actually may have M1923 cartridge belt around. Here we go. James is actually wearing the M1923 cartridge belt. Those would hold the end blocks that went with the M1 Grand rifle. Some of the other specialty gear I have on, if I turn around, I do have an E-tool, the entrenching tool. But this one, I have cut the handle down. Otherwise, the handle would have been down here. So I do have a wire cutter set. I have my shortened E-tool. Tucked back under here is actually, there's a leather pouch. This has my TL29 knife and also a set of pliers. Coming around, I do have, I believe back here is my canteen. The Massette bag. Shane, if you could hold this for me, please. No, actually, that would show pretty well. Shane actually has a Massette bag worn in the position like a backpack that it would be on your back. However, and he doesn't have it clipped in, which is perfect. If we can flip this over, he might have to take his helmet off. This is the position that I have it on right here, and I have my letdown rope as well, which is secured here in case I got caught in a tree or something. But my Massette bag is flipped over just like we did with Shane, and that, obviously, it's not a backpack at this point, but allows me, therefore, to get the T5 parachute on, and it sits lower than the reserve, and then my reserve is here. So when you did land and you took off your reserve, took off your harness, because the chute's already gone, or out, deployed, you would then take that Massette bag, flip it over, and then get back on the road. As we said, if the Griswold bag was ripped off, you might have to find a replacement. In the meantime, by the time they jumped in Holland, they would generally just stuck it in their behind their parachute harness and their belly band, and then jump with it ready to deploy.
All right. I won't get into the configuration that everybody's wearing here, but this is some typical stuff that guys would end up with on the ground there on D-Day. And like I said, we can't get into each one of them, but later on, if you all want to come down and take a look and ask questions about exactly what they're wearing. But Zippy's got, the bottom line is he's got a reserve on the front, he's got the main chute on the back, he's got all the other gear. Hey, they hit the ground, they got out of the harness, and they started fighting down there. And the guys in the gliders were very similar, too. They just didn't have this thing on the front and this thing on the back. And they
no
didn't get
hazard
combat pay either, by the way. The glider guys did not. Is that right?
Straight pay, no hazard pay.
No hazard pay. So all right, we're going to keep walking back out to the front here, talk a little bit more about the airplane. But you guys, thank you very much. And please don't go away. Let these guys, when we're done, they'll be able to ask some questions. And yeah, you can take a look at, what was that configuration when they went out? Go ahead.
Sir, we never have enough time to talk as much as we'd like about everything, as you know, Warbirds Review. Crowd-wise, please stop by, talk to us, ask us any questions.
Yeah, and your area, by the way, is, described down at the end of this road right here, off to the right, and that's where they hang out all the time. So,
yes, sir.
Thank you. Now we're going back to the airplane here a little bit, and we're going to, from a configuration, engine, flying standpoint, what are the motors?
So they're Pratt & Whitney R1830-92s, 1,200 horsepower engines, and they're actually that's kind of one of the many things that makes this a C-47 as opposed to a DC-3. The DC-3 was originally built with Wright engines, but they were pressed into service in the bombers, so they used the Pratt & Whitney engine for the C-47s.
Okay. And typical speeds, and I'll ask. Well, let's go over here and sit down for a minute. I'm curious. We talked about the drop speeds and stuff like that, but how about your cruise speeds? And we'll let these guys. These are the guys who were flying the airplane. Justin, how about how fast were you going on the way over?
Well, when we were heavy, we were at 120, and then as we got lighter, we were able to get to a whopping 130.
Okay, and as long as we're on that topic, how about describe the stops? Where'd you start? Where'd you stop? And how many stops?
So going over, we started in Oxford, Connecticut. First day we flew to Presque Isle, Maine. which would have been one of the last American stop points in the war. It was the last, American fuel you could buy. From there, we went to Goose Bay, Canada. From Goose, we went to Reykjavik, Iceland, then to Prestwick, Scotland, down to Northweld, England, which was kind of our home base for the first week we were over there.
Okay. And Luke, what was your job in the right seat there? Did you have a quote? Well, and by the way, Justin flies for some airline, I think, and does this for a living. But normally on trips, and I did that for a while too. But we would have an augmented crew. What kind of augmented crew did you have on this airplane?
Well, this airplane's 82 years old, and she doesn't have an autopilot. So I'm there. We had a 10.5-hour leg between Goose Bay, Canada, and Reykjavik, Iceland. So we certainly had plenty of time to trade out flying duties.
And how much time you got in one of these things?
Oh, around about 50 hours, most of which is over a lot of cold water.
All right. Now, more details about what went on during D-Day, and if y'all were here yesterday, you had a chance to see the other airplane, another C-47 here. It dropped some real paratroopers. How about numbers? How many? And I should have asked Zippy over there. Typical drop numbers. They talk about 28 passengers in it, but that's not the number of paratroopers. Normally it was something less, somewhere around 20, something like that, fully equipped.
That's correct. In wartime, the fully equipped paratroopers are kind of heavy. They like to carry a lot of kit with them.
Okay.
So it was around 20, 15 or 20, depending upon the
and
unit.
Let's get into what went on during this commemoration on the 6th of June. You guys dropped some people there. What was that mission like, and how many times did you do it?
I kind of lost track about how many times we did it. I don't know if you guys can remember how much, but we were the lead aircraft of the D-Day squadron, the group that brought a commemoration group of C-47s across the Atlantic to participate in the 80th anniversary. And amongst our entire group, we probably dropped several hundred reenactor paratroopers over the various historic drop zones in Normandy.
And how big were your formations for this?
For this event, it was about between 6 and 10 aircraft.
Okay.
Our largest formation was 10 aircraft. We did this event 5 years ago for the 75th. We had a 12 aircraft formation at that time. That's about the largest formation of C-47s that we've ever done.
Okay, and compare that to what really went on D-Day. How many airplanes launched, and how many?
So well over 800. And
800 airplanes.
800 aircraft, yeah.
Okay.
So what we did pales in comparison to that, but it does give a little bit of an understanding of the logistical challenge and the operational challenge of putting that many airplanes together at night in IMC. It gives you a new appreciation for just the basic flying portion of it. Forget about the combat element to it.
And speaking of that, the men that flew this back then, average age was?
About Luke's age. He's 19, and so he would have been kind of average age of a pilot, of a C-47 pilot, or certainly the troopers in the back of the aircraft, which is quite sobering when you think about it as a parent and the sacrifices that our young people make to keep us free.
You've made 3 crossings back and forth. You were there, I said, for the 70th, the 75th, and the 80th. I'll just ask now, I'm sure that there were some issues in the crossings. I'm curious, what was the worst, if you will, for any of those crossings?
I think the biggest challenge, honestly, is the cold.
Okay.
I think if you guys can relate. There's no insulation. There's very, very little heat. We're flying along. I think the temperature in the cabin was minus 20 Celsius. Our lavatory froze because it is so cold, and you're sitting for such a long time immobile. That really is probably to me was the biggest challenge.
What was typical cruise altitude?
We've done everything from...
Yeah, we crossed over averaging 11, and then the return we averaged about 8,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And winds, did they help out? Did they hurt? How bad were they?
We had really good winds helping us over there. So the flight to Iceland was about 9 hours. The return flight, we had terrible winds, and it was about 10 and a half, close to 11 hours in the air.
Okay. Talk a little bit about flying the airplanes. You guys are all very experienced. And I'll just say, how many names does this thing have? Hey, it's officially the C-47 Skytrain. Then the Brits, I guess, called it the Dakota. The Navy calls it the R-4D. Okay. Right. Then you get into the AC side of it, and it's Spooky, or it's Puff the Magic Dragon. And what do you guys like to call it?
Well,
Lassie.
Well, Placid, we call her Lassie.
Lassie, okay, all right.
Because of the history of the aircraft, it was a British group that originally got her airworthy when she was discovered, and so they always called her a Dakota. So I'm still kind of partial to the British Dakota.
I understand. Okay, but now getting back to flying the airplane itself. Big, heavy, relatively speaking. A tail dragger, obviously. In fact, Luke, there was some story about tail draggers. Have you ever flown a nose wheel airplane?
No, I'm trying to avoid it as best I can.
I think he's kind of unique in that, yeah. All his ratings, and he's got private commercial instruments, CFI, everything has been done in a tailwheel airplane. So he's a very experienced tailwheel pilot. But I ask in that regard, how is it to land? How is it to take off? Is it pretty placid, or is it and I'll ask Luke first with all the tailwheel time. What do you think? Is it an easier one? Is it a more difficult one?
I think they were being pretty honest when they called it Placid Lassie. She's been pretty good to us, and compared to some of the other airplanes that are out there, there are lots of different weird little quirks, but she's really pretty straightforward.
Justin, what do you think? Easy airplane?
It helps when your rudder is about an acre, so she handles well.
And I got to ask you, Eric, what do you think?
She's a very straightforward tail dragger, very straightforward aircraft. Not the sportiest thing in the world. She's built to go from point A to point B and be very solid, and she does that extraordinarily well.
How about crosswinds? How's it doing crosswinds? Big problem? Is there a limitation? I'm sure there is.
I'm sure it was broken in wartime, including gross weight and everything. She's pretty good in crosswinds. Nice big rudder, good rudder authority. A lot of adverse yaw. The ailerons are not very effective in roll. They're very good in yaw. Okay. So you have to be very aware of what the what the ailerons are going to do. In a crosswind situation, but you treat her right, and she treats you right.
How about weight and CG? Easy to overload, or can you, if you can put it in there, you can carry it. And is there a CG problem? You got to be careful about where you put the stuff.
Oh, it's any large aircraft. You have to be careful about center of gravity. This is no different. I think history has proven that this airplane can carry well beyond its design weight. There's some military manuals that we've researched and we look at, and they publish charts well above 30,000 pounds. The civilian gross weight is 25,000 pounds on this, but the military publishes charts well above 30,000 pounds, and then there's a notation or additional weight for mission needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
At the bottom.
So, how about putting up with gunfire? Any bullet holes in this airplane?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So it escaped, if you will. I mean,
she did escape. Yeah. Of the original 5 crew in the war, 1 crew member was killed in the crash of another aircraft.
Okay.
But the rest of the crew survived, and she was damaged in a landing actually. She was struck by a landing aircraft while parked in the kind of the craziness after D-Day. So an advanced landing field. So.
Okay. How about talk? Who owns it, and do you know much of the acquisition process of it?
Yeah. So Lassie is owned by the Tunison Foundation, which is a nonprofit flying museum that was established by a gentleman by the name of James Lyle, who originally identified this aircraft, sponsored its restoration, and ultimately wanted to have the aircraft fly perpetually beyond his involvement to the aircraft, his involvement with the aircraft. So we're a nonprofit. We both operate Lassie. We lead the D-Day Squadron, which is kind of the amalgamation of the C-47s that are out there commemorating D-Day and all the other events that C-47 was involved in. And we partner with a number of other organizations, similar organizations like Commemorative Air Force, and a number of other organizations like that's to put on events and to commemorate.
Was it a massive rebuild when they first acquired it? Was there a lot to be done to it, or was it in reasonable flying condition?
So Lassie, we found her most recent civilian job was before we acquired her. Well, she was a freighter and had been actually more or less abandoned in North Georgia. Had been flying baby chicks up and down the East Coast, and as often happens with old freighters, there was maintenance that was required, and the operator couldn't pay for the maintenance, and she was pushed off into the corner of the field. But interestingly, there was no damage, so we didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get her flying, and we've been kind of working on a flying restoration process. She's not she still very much looks like the freighter that she was, which I think is really nice. It shows not only the original history of kind of making their name, but also the role that the C-47 and DC-3 has played post-war.
Okay, how about cost? What's it burn per hour? I'll ask first fuel. How much does it, and then I'll ask oil after that.
So she burned. We flight plan about 100 gallons an hour.
Okay.
In long cruise we burn a little bit less than that, and we budget about a gallon of oil per hour. It's been going up. It goes up as the time gets up on the engine. So we're probably getting to about a gallon per hour per engine.
And how long will those engines last? How long did they last in the war? Do you know offhand how many hours? Did they put lots of hours on them?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I doubt it. They were not. This is not about longevity. This was about getting the mission done in the short term. I think the published TBO for an 1830 is 1,400 hours.
Okay.
We've got one of our engines. I can't remember. Is it the right or the left engine? One of our engines was put on during the restoration in 2010, or kind of the rebirth of Lassie in 2010, and she's been flying ever since. So that engine's got probably 900-ish hours on it, and still going strong. Right? I should find some wood to knock on, but she's still going strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. All right. Well, I'm going to see if there's anything else we've kind of missed. Everybody can see what the wingspan is, about how high it is. Visibility is good. Justin, what do you think? Visibility from up there? I mean, you look at some of these fighters, they're zigzagging down the taxiway.
It's one of the few tail draggers you don't have to S-turn while taxing.
Okay.
Your visibility is good enough, take off, landing, and taxiing. You can just keep going straight and you can see where you're going.
Mm-hmm. How about landing that thing at night? Night land? Do you do much of it?
I haven't done one.
Okay. Because I was curious, you think about all those airplanes that they launched during D-Day, and they were launching in bad weather, they were launching at night, and they were having to fly formation. And it just amazes me how they did that without really. I mean, they did it with their eyeballs, basically. And you guys fly formation here, and I'll ask Eric. He's probably got the most formation time in that thing. Easy airplane, hard airplane to fly formation with?
Well, it's not a sports car.
Oh.
So it's you have to think a lot when you're flying formation because you have to anticipate. You have a lot of mass, a lot of inertia, but I take particular pride in showing people that we can actually fly the aircraft in formation.
If you didn't see him, by the way, yesterday, you were flight lead yesterday, weren't
Correct.
you?
Yeah.
On the 2 ship, the other airplane dropped the paratroopers, but I was impressed. I've flown a lot of formation, and I'm just going, wow, that's 2 DC-3s out there, and they're both doing an outstanding job. And I've never flown formation in a DC-3, but yeah, it looks like you say, you got to stay ahead of the game, and if you can, then you guys make it look good. And any engine limitations in flying formation?
That is probably the biggest challenge, especially as the aircraft get older and we try to get some longevity out of the engines. We have to be very careful about abusing the engines. The 1830 is a wonderful engine when it's pulling, but it's not a very good engine when it's being pushed.
Okay.
Or otherwise known as reverse loading. So oftentimes, if you're going too fast, the first reaction is to pull the power off, and that's probably the kiss of death for an 1830.
Okay.
Most round engines, but particularly in the 1830s. So we have to be very, very careful about that. We just take our time. We just move. She's still big old slow beast, 130 knots, 110 knots, maybe 140 going downhill.
Yeah.
We did a high-speed pass yesterday.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I must have missed that one somehow.
It's still going on.
All right. Well, I'm going to open up to questions here in a minute, but I want to make sure. I guess I got to say, it was indeed an honor to be able to participate in that D-Day commemoration over there. Any tremendously memorable moments there. I mean, obviously, I've never been to Normandy. I'd like to go. That's on one of my bucket lists. And yeah, I'm thrilled that you guys were able to do what you've done for the 70th, the 75th, and the 80th, and plans to do it for the 85th maybe. I don't know.
I feared that question was coming. I mean, we never say never. It becomes more and more difficult each and every time, but. Every time we go over, but it probably becomes even more important to keep the memory alive.
Yep.
You guys could probably speak to some of the events and the experiences that we had while we were in Europe, but from my standpoint, the commemoration and the remembrance of the significance of really this was the beginning of the end of the war, and for so many people. And for so much of our civilization, it was such a pivotal moment that we it's very easy to forget that, and it was very heartening and very meaningful to know that it's not forgotten, especially in Europe.
Well, and that's one reason that we're up here like this, and we're going to go away before these guys are going to go away most likely, and I thank you two guys, for being here, for doing this, and for flying that airplane and keeping that memory alive. And we've got to pass down that. And thank you so much for doing that. And get some nose wheel time. You need a little bit of nose wheel time. So, all right, I'm going to open it up to questions here now. And please feel free. From stem to stern on the airplane, on the crossings. There's so much I think that could be talked about on those crossings, all that went on. But okay, let's open it up to some questions. We got anybody who wants to ask? There's one up there.
Right here. Of those 800 that participated in D-Day, do you have a good number for how many returned to England? What the casualty rate was?
My understanding, and I'm not the unit historian, so, but it was less than 50, fewer than 50 casualties on the first wave.
Which, in the big scheme of things, with that number, it's pretty good. Is okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to lose any, of course, but nonetheless, and it was expected, but yeah, and we got the men on the ground that we needed to win that invasion, basically. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you all, first of all, for doing what you do. On the commemorative jump, were the jumpers former military, or who jumped when you guys were flying this?
So it's a combination. Most people have some sort of military connection. We actually, like the jumpers that jumped the last couple days, they come from all walks of life. It's really the commonality is wanting to commemorate and remember the sacrifices. We also do jump active duty. We did jump the 75th Rangers when we were in Europe, so there's a lot of interest from active duty military to jump out of the historic aircraft.
How were you accepted over there by the locals? Where did you park the airplane?
We parked the airplane. We were in a variety of different areas, and the welcome. I cannot speak enough good things about the welcome that we received in Europe. Just because I think coming from the understanding of the significance of this aircraft and the history, we just had an extraordinary welcome everywhere, in England, in France, going on into Germany. We didn't even, part of our commemoration was also the 75th anniversary of the Berlin airlift. Okay. And so we had an extraordinary reception in Germany as well.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Something we didn't talk about, the paint job. And I know, by the way, I think Connie touched on it, but this is just eye candy over here on my right, this P-47. It's going to be here this afternoon, and it's going to be more than eye candy this afternoon. We're going to have the pilot, the owner, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this thing's got some stripes on it, and talk about the stripes a little bit.
Yeah, so they're known as invasion stripes, and that was actually something that the military realized during earlier airborne operations. One that's oftentimes forgotten was the invasion of Sicily several months prior, and they lost an enormous number of aircraft to friendly fire. Mm-hmm. So the invasion stripes, the black and white stripes were developed to be able to avoid friendly fire. So all Allied aircraft that participated in D-Day and shortly thereafter had the black and white invasion stripes painted overnight to identify themselves, to be identified and not be, and reduce the likelihood of them being shot down. Interestingly, they also became a very easy identifying factor for the Germans. So several days after D-Day, and you'll see period photographs of this, the invasion stripes, it was ordered for the invasion stripes to be removed. You see a lot of aircraft with just the top invasion stripes removed because it made it very easy to see the aircraft when they were parked on the ground, and they got rid of them as quickly as they could.
Okay. Yeah. There's another P-47 down at Show Center. It's got invasion stripes on it, I do believe. That's Bonnie down there. All right. Other questions? I know there was another one out there somewhere. Yep. There we go. Right there, sir.
My mother's first cousin flew the C-47 in Europe during the war. Afterwards, he flew in the Berlin airlift. Did this plane participate in the airlift?
Lassie did not participate in the airlift. Many C-47s did. The Berlin airlift is most well known for the C-54, the DC-6, DC-4, DC-6. But they used everything that was available at the outset, including the C-47.
Okay. Another one somewhere? No?
Yeah, over here.
There we go.
It was my understanding that when the United States entered the war, that the DC-3s that were owned by airlines and privately or corporations were all secured and used for the war effort. I'm just wondering, did they make their way back to those companies? Were they returned to the original owners?
That I believe so. Certainly the airline aircraft, and there's so many different ways that the aircraft were operated. In the kind of transport area, sometimes the airlines continued to operate the aircraft in military service. So, and certainly, even if that actual aircraft was not returned, there were 15,000 of these built. So they were able to replace it with another one after the war.
A lot of airplanes. Yeah. Yep. All right, we've got one right here.
Yeah, you said this aircraft had an accident shortly after D-Day. Another airplane hit it while it was parked on the ground. How long did it take before it got back airborne?
I don't know. My guess is fairly quick. The report is a little sketchy.
Do you have any other history besides D-Day what operations it was involved in?
Yeah, it participated in all the operations across Northern Europe, all the way through the crossing of the Rhine. So Market Garden and subsequent operations.
Okay, one right here.
To the gentleman's question over there about the return of the aircraft, Wildcat, who dropped the paratroopers last night with the airborne demonstration team, was actually taken away from Eastern Airlines right off the production line and was returned to Eastern Airlines in late 1945. So They did make the round trip a little bit used and worn for
Yeah,
wear.
slightly used.
All right, and just by the way, I didn't mean to downplay this P-47, but it was instrumental in D-Day also. It was I'd have to say probably one of the primary ground attack airplanes that was used then, and also some of the air-to-air stuff. So it was prevalent there. But like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit here this afternoon. All right.
You mentioned Market Garden. Are you going over for the 80th of Market Garden?
For the 80th of Market Garden, we are not, unfortunately.
Any other C-47s going?
There are a number of C-47s that are based in Europe that will be participating. There's probably a half a dozen that are active throughout Europe that will be participating in the Market Garden commemorations. The big challenge for us is one of weather. Market Garden happens so late in the fall that when we come back across the Atlantic, we're really dealing with winter weather, which it really starts pushing the risk level up significantly.
Speaking of that, how's it doing ice? Have you messed around at all? Is it one of those, hey, you see a little bit, you got to get out of it? Just go ahead.
Yeah, you get out of it once you're in it. Sometimes you don't have a choice. We picked up a little bit between, approaching Greenland, but once you get out of it, the ice
goes away pretty quick.
Sublimates pretty quickly. It's you don't really feel it unless you we never really got any bad ice, just a little bit of clear ice.
Okay. How about avionics? Do you have some upgraded avionics up there, or are you, flying IFR in this thing? Is it? I know there's no autopilot. Thank you very much, Luke. We appreciate that. But no, flying IFR in this thing. Is it, something you don't want to do, but you have to do? You can do.
So we do have the magenta line. We did install a GPS. We have dual 430s. Otherwise, it's all 6-pack. This was the first airplane I flew 6-pack IFR in. I was a child of the big screen glass panels, and gives you an appreciation for how they used to do it back in the day.
So you're using round gauges now on this thing?
Yep, this is all 6-pack round gauge.
Okay. Okay.
It's a very sorry.
Go ahead, Luke. What do you think? I'm sure you're the primary autopilot. So how do you do it? Pretty easy to fly IFR in it?
It's really pretty straightforward. If you have a little bit of experience with the 6-pack stuff, it's same idea as any other little airplane, and she's heavy enough that it's a really nice and stable platform, even through kind of rough weather.
Okay. Another question over here.
My question is a question back in time. You described the modern navigation aids. What were they using back during the war, and specifically on D-Day, to navigate to where they needed to be?
So going across the Atlantic, it was largely dead reckoning, supplemented with low frequency radio ranges. Although you couldn't always trust them because the Germans were well known for deploying U-boats with dummy beacons that would lead the aircraft astray. This probably, for a C-47 crew, was probably one of the most dangerous things that they did was going across the Atlantic, because today we have continuous data stream and weather, and of course we have the magenta line that we can follow. But we just have that continuous communication, continuous data stream, and that did not exist at all during the wartime. On actual D-Day, I think the reenactors were showing.
Yeah, hold on. Let's get Zippy. Hey, paratrooper Zippy, pay attention. Come up here for a minute, please.
Front and center.
All right. The Pathfinders were the first guys that were dropped, and they were the guys who, were supposed to more or less lay out the drop zone and get ready for the mass invasion. But those Pathfinders traveled with. Go ahead, Zippy, you're on. Tell them about what's in front of you right there.
There were two items. Marker panels, obviously not at night, wouldn't work, but the Eureka beacon here would be set up, and then the Rebecca in the cockpit would actually pick that signal up. So there were two ways. They could either do it by radio signal here, or we do also have, Matt Miller brought out the light, so you can actually signal from the ground with the lights, but primarily the Eureka beacon. There were some cases where equipment was lost as well, which attributed to some of those missed drops from the drop zone.
Okay, and that box also had an explosive charge in it, didn't it? If the enemy captured that? Didn't it blow up or something like that? Didn't they? I thought there was an explosive charge involved in some of it.
I had heard stories about that. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. All right, but that's part of the navigation process that they used during D-Day, to make sure they got to the right drop zone. And as we already talked about, a lot of them didn't, but that was to our advantage somewhat and the Germans' disadvantage. So, all right, other questions out here? There's one up at the top there. Oh, we need a microphone, though.
Guys.
Of the beacon? Yeah, what, any idea what the range of the beacon was? How close did they need to come to pick it up?
Memory is probably not going to work with me right now. I'm drawing a blank. I believe it was about 10 or 12 miles.
Okay.
That's what I want to say. I don't recall exactly, but the number that sticks in my head is 10 or 12.
I suspect that it was relative to altitude also. The lower they got, probably, the shorter the range was. That's what I found in some of my encounters. So yeah. All right, there's one right there.
I'm curious to know how y'all manage maintenance when going over to Europe and what kind of spare parts you're able to bring. And obviously you can't bring everything, so just curious on the maintenance side for planning for contingencies.
Well, I think the part of our team that's not here, we have a team of almost 25 people that support just Lassie, and of course all the other aircraft were very similar. So we have a team of volunteers, a really dedicated team of volunteers that traveled with us various stops, and we did phase inspections out on the ramp. It was quite the view of having all 25 people, or most of them, swarm all over the aircraft and make and get her airworthy going forward. The fortunate thing about C-47 is that it is, it's the DC-3. They still fly quite a bit. Parts availability is probably a lot better than most Warbirds, and so we're able to carry a lot of spares. We also have a large aircraft. We can carry a lot of spares and source them very, very quickly.
It still takes a village, so to speak.
It does take a village. This is not an airplane. This is not a fighter.
Yeah.
Or even in a fighter, it's all the people on the ground that make you look good. And
modern day cost. What's a modern day cost for one of these? I'm curious.
What's
to buy or to upgrade?
Yeah, if
for the
somebody
aircraft or for the engine?
wanted to get into the Warbird business, we talked about at the very beginning of these shows, we had an L5 out here. $30,000 you could buy an L5 and get in and be a Warbird kind of guy. How about a C-47 like this? Any idea now?
They're running anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000.
Okay.
But like with all Warbirds, the purchase price is a down payment.
Mm-hmm. Well put. Well put. All right, we got one over here, a youngster.
Hello. How effective was the C-47 in its later role as an attack aircraft in Vietnam, the AC-47?
Do you guys have any? I'm not an expert on that.
I can talk to that a little bit. Hey, it was replaced by the AC-130. But hey, when it first came out, the Vietnamese call it, the Puff the Magic Dragon, and it had that minigun on the side. It went into its constant bag, and it just lit people up down there. It was deadly. And then, as I said, it morphed into the AC-130, where they ended up putting a 105 millimeter cannon in the side of that thing, and more. And so yes, it was very effective in Vietnam. But hey, they wanted more, and they got more when they put it in the AC-130.
Thanks.
If I recall correctly, it was basically a bullet for every foot of basically a football field.
Yeah. Yep. I'll agree with that. When I went to the academy, one of my instructors was instrumental in the guidance system for that 105 millimeter cannon, and he actually brought the tapes to class, and we were able to sit there and watch trucks blowing up with this 105, and watch the whole airplane shift when they pulled the trigger on that thing. It was very interesting. Go ahead, sir.
I can speak to the young man's question. I flew EC-47s in Laos in the Vietnam War, and I was trained on an AC, at least the theory of the gunnery, so in case they had to put us into ECs. When I got there, they were giving those ACs to the Vietnamese Air Force. And I can tell you, having seen both from the shooting end on a range and from the receiving end just outside a perimeter at an air base in the Central Highlands, it would lay down fire extremely well. And it's just based on the firing triangle, altitude and offset of a target. It's not unlike flying a base, turning a final and putting that target in the 8 o'clock position. Very, very effective, these airplanes.
Yep.
I got to fly it geolocating enemy radios on the ground and providing targeting data for B-52s and other sources.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before I end, I'm going to ask, and I typically do this in my presentations, I'm going to ask veterans, active duty, please rise. We want to say thank you to you all.
Sit down. Sit down.
All right, any other questions? Yep, there's one in the corner over there, okay?
I actually flew a lot of hours spraying gypsy moth mosquitoes at 150 feet, but I did fly with our one pilot was a gunner airplane, but there's a DC-3 in Dover, Delaware, at the Air Museum, and they have it equipped out with all the pods underneath, and there's radio things that's antennas up there by the cabin. It's the Dover Air Force Museum in Dover, Delaware, where the C-5s and C-17s are. It's well-equipped DC-3, and their DC-3 don't fly, but it does have a bullet hole through one of the seats. And 2 or 3 years ago, they had 2 guys that come back that actually sat in that airplane and told the story.
Wow. Wow. All right, I'm going to say we're about out of time here. So, gentlemen, including Zippy, thank you to you and your reenactors. Thanks for being authentic with your dress and your descriptions. Eric, I got to say thank you for being here. Thanks for the foundation, for doing what you do for our country. I mean, and truly speaking, you represented our country when you went over there. So, Luke, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Justin, appreciate it very much. Thank you, folks.